Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Bruce, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Tom, are you ready?
I am go.
You know what? You know who we're talking to tonight, Tom?
I think we're talking to Bob Sprague.
Bob Sprague, who's the guy that you're always talking about.
That's right.
The incredible Bob Sprague, as you like to say. The guy that I'm not 100% sure even exists until I tracked him down.
Track planner to the stars.
Track planner to the stars. Do you remember what you said to me when I said, hey, he'd be a cool guy to interview?
I think I said he would.
No, you said he was too busy.
Oh, I did. Maybe I did say that.
Yeah, you did. You said, oh, no, he's too busy for this podcast. For maybe...
Ooh, for this podcast.
Yeah, for maybe for Mike and Scotty or whatever. What do they call that show? Scotty and Mike or whatever that show is?
Scotty Live.
Scotty Live, yeah, maybe for Scotty Live. I remember you said this specifically that for Scotty Live he was available.
Oh, come on, man.
I remember that. Do you remember that, Bruce?
Oh, I seem to recall him saying that, yes, we were merely second-rate chopped liver compared to the other guys.
Exactly. See, Tom, I have a witness.
Okay.
I can hardly wait to talk to Bob and talk to Tom at the same time because as far as I can tell, the only place that Tom is modeling is what's that place start with? It starts with an A.
Albertus.
Albertus, yeah, that's the only place that Tom is modeling is Albertus. Where is Albertus? Is it in Maryland? Philadelphia? Pennsylvania?
It is a few miles east of Allentown. Or, I'm sorry, west of Allentown.
Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Correct.
All right, I knew that. Home of the Allentown Tigers.
No, actually, home of the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs.
Really?
Yep.
Is that baseball or hockey or football?
It's baseball. That is their AAA Phillies farm team.
Oh, really?
The Iron Pigs.
The Iron Pigs.
That's a sweet handle.
That is a sweet handle, exactly. That's like the Toledo Mud Hens, is that what they're called?
Mud Hens for the Tigers, AAA affiliated of the Tigers.
Yeah, exactly. I love.
And then one, you got your Buffalo Bisons.
Yeah, I love AAA baseball hats from New Era. I buy the fitted ones, and everybody goes, "Who's that?" And I'm like, I don't know. It's just a cool looking hat. All right, so tonight we're going to interview Bob Sprague. Do you know where Bob lives, Tom?
I believe Bob now lives in Baltimore.
Has he ever invited you to his house?
He has not.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, seriously. I mean, come on. All right, so tonight we're going to talk to Bob Sprague, track planner to the stars, and he has a really cool website, bobstrackplans.com, and when I saw the website, I thought, oh my God, we have got to talk to this guy. So could one of you fellas please go and get him out of the green room?
We'll send Tom down.
Yeah, let's send Tom because he knows him best.
Hey, Bob, come on, they're ready for you upstairs.
Bob?
Watch your head there, Tom. Don't ding your dome.
Yeah, don't ding your dome, Tom. Bob?
Okay, I'm here.
Attaboy. Bob, do you know?
How are you?
Fine. Have you ever met Tom Jacobs?
I have met Tom Jacobs several times, actually, now.
Yeah, is he as great a guy as he appears to be?
I don't think you can really understand the full effect of meeting Tom until it's actually happened to you. So, and kind of indescribable.
Yeah.
It's like the Tom Jacobs experience is what it is?
Yeah. The Tom Jacobs experience. Oh, I love that. All right, so Mr. Sprague, you are a track planner extraordinaire.
Why, thank you very much.
Well, your website
I got to say before we go on that, I'd heard you describe the studio and the green room on some of the other podcasts, but until I got here, I did not realize the lap of luxury that you guys operate in most of the time here.
I know. It's like, well, the podcast
was he down in the gold room and not the green room?
Yeah, exactly.
The
It's been
spread of appetizers and fine wines that you offer down there.
Geez, who put him in the wrong room?
We spare no expense for our guests. And don't forget, like I told you, as soon as you send me the check for $200, we'll be publishing your podcast, your interview.
Good.
Tom, where should we start with Mr. Sprague? Tom, have you ever listened to our podcast?
Once or twice, yeah.
All right. Where should we start with Mr. Sprague? I feel like I should call. Do we go? Is it Bob or Robert?
Bob.
All right. I feel like for some reason or other, I just feel like Bob is one of those distinguished gentlemen that, if he saw me coming down the street, he'd probably cross it. He'd be like one of those cool guys you'd meet, and he'd be like, you just couldn't help but call him Mr. Sprague. Where should we start with Bob, Tom? What would be the first question that you would ask Bob?
That I would ask?
Yeah.
I know what
I would
Tom's going to ask is, when am I going to finish the next level of his railroad?
Well, that's what I want to ask you. He keeps saying that you've designed the track plan and it's finished. And I wouldn't want to put a copy of the track plan on the website for the podcast, but he's always hemming and hawing.
It's been quite an experience with Tom because I think we've been working on this thing for well over 2 years. And the interesting thing is, of course, he's building faster than I can draw. And I'm afraid he's going to overtake me to the extent that, it's just going to sort of get finished and I'll still have a 3/4 finished track plan, and the world will never know what it might have looked like in full completion.
Okay, so you guys have been you've been kind of doing it as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bob, I hate to tell you, I'm going into my email folder, and we have actually been working on this for 3 years.
Okay.
We started in 2014.
So how did you guys find each other?
Well, I found Bob through Rob Hinkle, who is another Reading modeler up here in the southeastern PA area. And Bob had done Rob's track plan. And so, based on the reference and some info from Rob, I found Bob's website and, looked at his sample plans and reached out to him and, asked if he would be willing to help design my layout.
And he said?
He said yes, and the rest is history.
So how did you get into doing track? So, Bob, have you been a lifelong model railroader?
Yeah, I think I have particular distinction because I became a model railroader when I was 5 days old. And it's the typical getting the Lionel set, but my grandfather was a General Electric employee and could not wait to have a male grandchild because, of course, you wouldn't think of giving a electric train to a female grandchild. So I got mine when I was 5 days old. I have some great pictures of me lying on the floor drooling while the train rolls around. That kind of thing.
Not unlike...
And to this day, nothing's changed.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
I was going to say, not unlike Tom Jacobs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I sit upright.
So, and where are you from originally?
I was born in Washington, D.C., and grew up in the area pretty much the whole time.
Was your dad the president?
Grew up in Maryland. He was not, but he was in the White House press corps, as a matter of fact.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was in the White House press corps when Nixon was in office, and went to China on the first trip with Nixon and Kissinger and Dan Rather and Barbara Walters and all those people.
Wow.
And,
Whoa.
after Nixon resigned, he was covering the State Department when Henry Kissinger was there, so he went around the world several times, covering Henry Kissinger, and it was quite a fascinating. Of course, at the time I didn't appreciate any of that. And now I wish I could talk to him about all his experiences, but unfortunately, he's passed away.
I know, that's like my dad. My dad was in the Toronto Scottish Regiment, and he was, of course, a World War II guy, and him and his 4 brothers, and they were all World War II guys in Toronto Scottish Regiment. And then, when he came back, he stayed in the militia, and he was a major or something. And I hung out with him every Saturday at the armories, and twice he met the Queen Mother. And like at the time, I remember my mother and my dad and everybody being all excited that he was on the front page of the Toronto Telegram, and I'm thinking, hey, look, it's my dad in the paper. Like you don't realize what it is you're looking at. And it's the same thing. I mean, for your dad to be in the White House press corps for all that stuff, holy moly. And do you have like mementos of that or anything like that?
Some, yeah. He was fairly laid back. So, my mother used to talk about how he'd come home from work and she'd say, well, what happened today? I said, I don't know. King of Jordan was here, something like that. It was just another day at the office.
And was your dad involved in model railroading at all, or?
He was sort of to help me when I was younger, and he had a pretty unique approach where he sort of didn't believe in buying anything except for rolling stock and track, and he would get up at 3 a.m, which is when he usually would arise, and he'd go down and he'd make scenery out of sawdust and scraps of wood and cardboard and things like that, which was pretty good considering what he was starting with. He actually, how power plants have the big sort of fancy windows. He built one of those and used spaghetti for all the window frames, and it really it held up pretty well for a few years, but it was unique to say the least.
And what scale was that? Was that HO or O or?
Yeah, it was HO. It was HO.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that? And so
you were, being my father's sense of humor, on the side of the building, it was the Gast Brewing Company, GAST, and it said, for a great time, get gassed.
And so were you building the model railroad then through your teenage years, or?
Yeah, through high school, and then like most of us went off to college and always stayed interested, but didn't have any way to do much building or anything. And that's where I sort of started track planning, because I was traveling a lot and I couldn't build a railroad, but I could still at that point haul out the compasses and pencils and draw things.
Right. So when you're in college, then you're starting your track planning already.
Yeah.
And
always
like what you've done is spectacular. Like, I highly recommend everybody go to bobstrackplans.com. This is one of the best websites on the internet for model railroad track plans, bar none. I mean, there's so much stuff on the internet, and these guys will tell you I'm a huge fan of the new digital world and the social media, and I think it's making the hobby explode. But this website is absolutely jam-packed full of useful model railroad track planning stuff. Is that what you'd call it, Bruce? Stuff?
That's the technical term, stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you remember the first plan you ever did for somebody else?
That's a good question, but yeah, actually I do. I was participating in a couple of online forums that have sort of died off since then, and there was a fella who sent in a sort of a rough pencil sketch of what he was planning to do in his basement, and I couldn't help myself. I said, I can see very clearly what's going to be the best track layout for that space, and so I sent him some sketches online, and he bit, and so we sort of took it from there. Somebody else saw that one, and about the same time I started seriously trying to send some plans in the model railroader, and got my first one published, I think, in 2005. So a few people started to track me down after that, and I've had a pretty steady stream since then, and it's been a lot of fun.
You've had a ton of articles printed, eh? In MR and what have you. Has it mostly been MR?
Mostly, yeah.
Like how many plans do you think you've had published in there?
I think it's 11 or 12 now, maybe more than that.
Wow. This is so cool. So if you don't mind me asking, what did you take in college?
Music.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was a music major.
And what did you do for a living? Or do
well,
for a living?
For 7 or 8 years after college, I did music on the road, and finally decided I was unlikely to ever become a skinny English rock star, and started a company which initially did music for advertising and films, and gradually transitioned into what it is now, which is more of a broad-based marketing and PR agency. But it started with the music, and still do some once in a while.
Okay, well, how cool is that? Now, did you know any of this, Tom?
I did not. I knew about the marketing and communications company, but I did not know that Bob was a music major.
Okay, and did you have a band for a while?
Oh yeah.
What was the name?
Yeah. Well, it was the one that lasted the longest was, and you got to remember this was the late 70s, but it was called the Sammy Del Bracco Show. That was not me. That was the front man that I worked with for a long time.
Sammy Del
Bracco.
And were you kind of like a long-haired? What instrument did you play?
I was a keyboard player back in the early days of synthesizers and things. So I was a music director and keyboard player, and would sort of train the band and write out the arrangements and things like that, along with playing the keyboards.
I think being a musician is just like one of the coolest things, one of the coolest gifts you can have, because I think it's something that you can do anytime that could probably cheer yourself up pretty quickly just by playing some music.
Well, I also think it's not to get too philosophical here, but what I really liked about music was creating big arrangements with scores, with lots of lines for all the different instruments and music going in and out. And it's not too unlike drawing a track plan and having to make everything come out in the right places. So it's not as far afield as it might seem from one to the other.
I'm telling you, I ought to start a podcast, you guys, because this has got to be the most interesting thing and all the things I've ever done in model railroading. I think this podcast has got to be far and away the most interesting thing I've ever done, because now we're talking to Bob Sprague, who's had lots of articles published in MR, track plans. He's a track planner extraordinaire, and he was a musician, and he has a marketing and PR business. And I think it's just like the coolest thing you find out about all these people. Just the coolest thing. Bob, I'm going to tell you about my friend, Jonathan Tessero. I'll tell you this quick story. Bruce, do people enjoy my stories, or is this where they go?
We always enjoy your stories, despite the fact some say they glaze over.
Okay.
Did you say something, Lionel?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Bruce will know who I'm talking about. There's a rather famous entertainer through the 80s and 90s, early 2000s called Dame Edna. Have you ever heard of Dame Edna?
I have, actually.
Okay, I'm playing poker one night with my buddies in Florida. I have a little house in Florida. And about 5 years ago, I'm playing poker with my buddies, and this one guy, Gary Tessero, he's a talking guy, and he's a fun guy to be around, but he talks. And he says, oh, you guys won't know this, but I'm going out to see my son in San Diego because he's the musical director for Dame Edna. And in Canada and England and Australia, Dame Edna is huge. He's huge. He's like huge. He's had everybody on his show. And I go, whoa. Back that bus up a couple of stops. Did you just say your son is the musical director for Dame Edna? He says, yeah. He says, do you know who that is? I went, do I know who it is? We never miss his show when he comes to Toronto to Massey Hall and this and that. So I said, what do you mean your son is the musical director? And he says, well, Dame Edna has one guy that sits at a piano on stage with him, and that's my son. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So anyways, long story short, I get to meet Jonathan Tesreau, who's been, who did the musical who directed for CBS when the Super Bowl was in New Orleans. He's been Dame Edna's musical director. He's done, movie scores. He's just a young fellow, about early 30s. But he's just another. He's a wonderful young man, and it's just fascinating. And he plays a Yamaha, gives him like a grand piano to play because he's so good at it. And he went to this in New York in the university, NYU, I guess, and took music there. So I think they have a program. Is that where he would have gone? Probably.
That's again NYU. What is it? Tisch, I think, is the school for the performing arts.
Yes, it was in New York. Anyways, Juilliard's
there also.
Yeah, it was it was whatever the famous school is in New York. So, anyways, he's a really cool young guy, and music is such a cool thing to do. All right, so somehow while you're traveling around North America with a rock band called, what was it called again?
The Sammy Del Bracco Show.
So you're doing the rock band thing and the musical stuff, and you're at the same time you're doing track plans. And at this time, are you living in the Washington D.C. area?
Yeah, I moved back here basically when the touring days were done, and wound up in Virginia, which is where the company still is, Northern Virginia, and lived there until fairly recently, and had some layouts and couple of houses that I was there, and had to take them down when I relocated to my current situation.
All right, and what do you model? What do you like to model?
Well, I've done a kind of a 180, because up until recently, until the last layout came down, I was doing the chassis system, which, like everybody, you grow up with a railroad, and it becomes your favorite railroad. So that's what was around here when I was a teenager. And then I moved to this house in Baltimore. It's about a quarter mile from where the Ma and Pa went through Baltimore. And there's a lot of remnants around. And I said to my new wife, we're real close to where this cute little railroad used to run through. And she said, well, you ought to model that. And I said, well, you don't understand. That means I'd have to sell everything I have and buy a whole bunch more trains. And she said, that's okay. And so that's what I have done. And I am now modeling the Ma and Pa in 1924.
Well, how cool is that? Man, oh man. And is she happy with you, or is she looking for a new husband, or?
So far, so good.
All right.
So far, so good. Yes, she's not only tolerant but encouraging this. So I think I've found a good one.
There you go. So, all right. So I think this is the coolest. I got to tell you guys, I think this is the coolest thing, this podcast. I mean, this is going to sound stupid when I listen to myself talking, but I mean, this is so interesting. I feel like I have 1,000 questions. We're only like 25 minutes in, and so far we've discovered his father was part of the White House press corps when Nixon went to China, and when Kissinger traveled the world. He was a music guy, and what was the band called again?
Well, I tell you, while listening to you, I almost sound like I'm an interesting guy.
Well, you are.
This is really great.
Yeah, you are an interesting guy, but I can't remember any. The reason this show works so well is I can't remember anything. So it was the Bob Sprague, or what was it again?
The Sammy Del Bracco Show.
Somebody write that down. I'm going to write it down myself. Right now, I'm writing it down. Del Bracco Show. What a cool name. All right, so then you were with that guy, and then after a while you start. So how do you start your own PR business? That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. I'm lucky that it's still in existence, with the things that have happened in the marketing business over the last 30 years. But it started like a lot of small businesses with just sort of two guys in this case, in a basement instead of a garage. And we lucked into a few things and found out that we had a talent for video, which was kind of a new thing in corporate America in the mid 80s. And, we were too dumb to know that we couldn't go and do music videos with a bunch of office workers. And after that, they started asking us to do their employee events to get everybody pumped up. And it was another step from there to sort of training and using video for customer purposes. And well, we had video, so pretty soon we had to add print design. And not long after that, you couldn't just go by with print design. You needed website design, and it just sort of kept on coming. And now it's all digital marketing, of course, and social media and stuff like that I'm too old to understand. But it's fun. It's different every day.
Okay, let me ask you this question. This is my favorite statement as of late. I think Tom and Bruce can back me up on this one.
Okay.
I think the hobby's growing like crazy because of the new world. I think it's absolutely exploding and nobody knows it because so many people can access it so much easier than they could, say, even 5 years ago. I think it's just going like crazy. Like, do you get the sense? Have you gotten the sense over the years? Like, how long have you been seriously drawing track plans for other people?
Oh, seriously, for 12, 13 years.
And have you gotten the sense over those last 12 or 13 years that it is like you must get the sense that more and more people are interested in what you do?
I think, yeah, I do. But, I look to some other evidence. It's like, how the heck can a manufacturer make it by doing the kind of cars and locomotives that we can routinely buy and, in the hobby store and online? The tooling that goes into those things and the, little incredibly fine details that just costs a lot of money to develop. And unless they were selling a lot of those things to a lot of people, I can't imagine that they'd have the bucks to do it and to do the variety and the specific cars that you can get now. It's not, you don't just get a fancy box car, you get fancy box car number, 12579, and it's got all the right details. Unless they had a big market for that stuff, they wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm with you. I don't know where everybody is, but they're out there.
Yeah, like that's what I've become. I don't know, more than just acquaintances with a fella named Shane Wilson, who's the president of ScaleTrains.com. And I mean, they only started like 3 years ago. And I mean,
Yeah.
and the things that they're doing is amazing. And that's what I think to myself. Like they got to be selling this stuff to somebody. And there's tangent scale models, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on of all these guys that are producing these spectacular models. And I think part of it is that the hobby's so accessible for everybody now. You'll be watching Russian car crash videos, and YouTube will suggest, maybe you'll like this about this guy's fantastic model railroad, and away they go.
Yeah.
All right, so it was a dark and stormy night, and all of a sudden, Tom Jacobs appears at the door.
The lightning flashed and the
yeah, exactly. And you went, it's alive, it's alive.
Well, the interesting thing is, I did a track plan that wound up in Model Railroader, based on Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I was sort of familiar from coming up to the south and going to Hershey Park, and you'd ride the little monorail all over the main line there, and I always said this would be a really neat subject for a model railroad, and so I did an in-scale bedroom plan, just not for anybody else, but just for fun, and it wound up in Model Railroader, and then the people who modeled that line started coming out of the woodwork, and I'm not counting Tom's because I'm still only halfway through it, have probably done 7 or 8 plans based on the X-Redding through central Pennsylvania there, and it's Rob Hinkle's was one of them, and Tom's is certainly the most elaborate, but there have been several, all sort of centering around Hershey or Harrisburg or Reading or that area of Pennsylvania, there's a lot of people who are really into that. The good news is I don't have to do the research over and over again because I'm getting to feel quite familiar with that trackage.
The Hershey, which is home of the Hershey Bears.
It is.
That's correct.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something to do with chocolate too, but I don't know any much about that.
Well, not that much anymore.
Oh, okay. Did you eat it all?
No, I didn't eat it all. They've outsourced a goodly portion of their production to Mexico.
Oh, okay. Have you eaten more than your fair share?
I like my Reese's peanut butter cups from time to time, I will confess.
Oh, okay.
But no, they've actually, within the past year or so, they've actually demolished the original factory in downtown Hershey. The big giant cocoa bean storage silos are still there, but they're no longer in use. Most of the production, there is the Reese's plant, which is in West Hershey on the west end of town. That's where most of the production in Hershey still exists. But the original main factory with the two big smokestacks and all of that stuff, the smokestacks and the powerhouse are still there, and the bean silos, but the plant itself has been leveled.
Really, eh? Wow.
Yeah, which really kind of sucks because they did that. They didn't consult with me beforehand and work around my schedule so that I could get out there and take pictures.
Yeah, no kidding. So is it going to be on your layout, the Hershey and the chocolate factory?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Do you know who gets to the first operating session? You know who gets to... Bob, do you know... This will be an interesting piece of trivia for you. When Tom has his first operating session, you know who the dispatcher is?
No, I can't say I do.
Yeah, me. I called dibs. I called shotgun on it a long time ago.
Well, you know the price of that, though.
What's that?
You got to get up there and build it.
No, I don't build nothing. I just come and
You just come and break stuff.
Yeah, as we would say in hockey.
He does situational testing.
Yeah, as we would say in hockey, I don't back check nobody. I score goals.
I paid my dues because I visited Tom on a Sunday work session. It was the day of the Great Helix disaster, and I was there to help and hold clamps and things like that while all that went down. So I certainly expect a spot on the operating crew once things happen.
So what you're saying is you were part of the disaster, or caused the disaster?
I again refuse to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Bob was a witness to history. He was like that. He was like that reporter with the Hindenburg disaster. You know, he was just standing there.
Oh, the humanity!
Yes, as Val, James, and I were trying to wrestle this thing into position and keep it together and keep the uprights from falling apart, and Bob was just there. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I have to go outside. I can't bear it anymore. So yeah, no, Bob did not cause the disaster. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time to witness it all.
See, we got a new podcast here, Lionel. AML, a witness to history.
Yeah, there you go. Bob, here's a question for you that you may find interesting. If you're having any problems with Tom's plan, he seems to have no idea what size his building is. Like sometimes it's 40 by 62, sometimes it's 26 by 32. He seems to have zero.
Is that the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah. No wonder.
Yeah, you wonder why none of the layers stacked up on top of each other? Yeah, there you go.
So no, that's just why I keep trying to cram more and more into it, Bob, because the size of the building keeps changing, and I keep thinking I have more space to work with.
Yeah.
And we want him to start a Facebook page. We want him to start a Facebook page because keep telling him people are going to be interested in this progress from patch of land to layout to mushroom sized layout. I keep telling him, but he won't start a Facebook page. What's wrong with him, Bob? Is he a private?
Tom's kind of retiring and doesn't like to talk
Well,
about
he is a secret
model
agent.
railroading
after
a whole
all.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, did you know he was a secret agent?
I did not know that.
Yeah, well, there you go. Your dad probably knew him.
I have 34 feet 6 inches by 18 feet 6 inches.
All right, that's not the size we've been told. 34.
Wow, that's
Inside
substantially
dimension.
different than what we've been told.
Yeah, we've been
Okay.
told some odd numbers. So what have you got? 34 by 6?
So I said
34.
34 feet 6 inches by 18 feet 6 inches.
Really?
That sound right, Tom?
Tom?
Those are the interior dimensions to my 36 by 20 pole barn.
All right. Is there anything you want to tell us, Tom?
Well, no. No, it's a 36 by 20 pole barn, and what Bob has is the accurately measured interior dimensions.
Okay.
He's taking into account the drywall, the insulation, the studs, all of that stuff. And once you factor all that in and you run the tape measure from one end of the room to the other, the measurements that Bob quoted are what you get.
Okay. So, all right. So you guys, so he tells you he wants to, so whose idea was it to build a mushroom layout?
I think that was a collective decision or delusion, as you may care to call it, that we started out with a fairly conventional double-decker, and you know, we had a good start, and Tom was feeling okay, but he wrote me one day and he said, you know, Bob, I built this building, you know, with 10-foot ceilings for a reason, and I really, you know, had anticipated that we'd have, you know, two full levels plus. And I said, well, there's one way I know to go up that high, and so we started playing with more of a helix type or a mushroom type concept. But in a way, it's kind of an inside out mushroom, because ordinarily in a mushroom, the center part is where the raised floor is, and in Tom's version, the center is the lowest point, and the raised platform is around the outside of the building. So the bulk of the raised portion is you know, against the walls with the pit in the middle where you walk in.
So how do you start? Like, this is like, I realize you start with, like, okay, to be completely honest, I hated track planning. I hated trying to decide what it was I was going to do, and I'd draw it out. And I guess there was a time in my younger adult years that when I built my house and I built my train layout specific room, but I mean, like, track planning is like nothing that I get excited about. So how do you start? Where do you start? Like, you've got the size, and then you had kind of started drawing the plan, and it was a double decker, and then Tom says, well, gee, you know, I kind of want to, like, how do you, like, do you just kind of, do you have a really fancy track plan designing software, or like, how many hours a week would you spend on this? Like, this is obviously a love of yours, or it wouldn't be this extensive.
Yeah, it is something I get a lot of satisfaction out of. It's a lot of fun for me, and I think part of the way to do it is you sort of come at it from several different angles simultaneously. There are certain immutables that you have to work with. Things like the size of a prototype human being and the width of an aisle that you really need to maintain, and the practical minimum radius. And I've done enough of these things now that when I get a certain space and I know the scale and I know the minimum radius, I can not immediately, but I can sort of look at the space and say, this is how much is going to fit in here. This is sort of the optimum shape that's going to give you the longest main line run for a given space. And you know, so there's a lot of variations to that, but you know, you can look at a space and say, you know, just mathematically, if you have a 30-inch minimum radius, you're going to need 5 feet wide to make a turn back loop, and you're going to need 3 inches or so on either side of that, just so that the trains fall over, they don't fall immediately on the floor. And then if you need a 3-foot aisle or a 2-foot aisle or a 4-foot aisle around that, you've got that much more space. And pretty soon you've used up most of a 10 or 12-foot wide room, for example, and you're only going to be able to get a turn back curve and one turn back curve in the middle of that. You can't do two, or you'll just it won't work, it won't fit. So that sort of can generate the basic shape of a railroad pretty quickly. And then I usually sort of pause and look at the features that people want to put in, because one of the things I enjoy is trying to work in literal representations of at least a portion of the prototype railroad that we're trying to evoke. So there are things that take a lot of space, like Ys and turntables and yards and big circular tunnels and things like that. And if the layout owner really wants to include a particular feature, it's good to sort of slot that in fairly early on and see where in the room that might actually go, and that again can sort of dictate what else you can do around it. So, fairly early on, I've drawn some big circles that I can move around on the computer screen and see how they fit, and some features that I know the layout owner wants to include. And again, the beauty of using a computer for this is you can take these things and you can rotate them and you can push them around without having to erase pencil marks to your heart's content.
Okay, so
now you must start off with a questionnaire. So somebody contacts you, I want to commission you to design a layout for me. There's obviously, I would assume, some sort of questionnaire you start with that you get the basics, like how much space you have, what are you modeling, and all that kind of thing. Yeah,
I stole most of it verbatim from John Armstrong.
All right.
Of course, because he, 60 years ago, he defined a lot of what goes into layout planning, and I added a few of my own. But yeah, you're exactly right. And then one of the hardest parts is getting people to accurately measure their space. This amuses me because people who will argue on how many rivets there are on the side of a boxcar will then send you say, "Oh yeah, I got about 25 by 30 feet." So, well, is it really 25 feet, or is it 24 feet 6 inches?
Well, no, it's actually 22 and a half by
which takes me back
to
Tom Jacobs'
house.
Yes.
Tom knows I made him measure and measure again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the same thing John Armstrong did. I had him commission a plan for me years ago, and back and forth. Make your drawing accurate, because this is what I have to work with, and if it doesn't fit, it's not my problem.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm looking at Dennis Mahaffey's, which is like the first one on your website, and so basically he gives you the size of the room, and you kind of quickly go, okay, it's going to kind of end up with one turn back peninsula and like that, and it pretty. I'm guessing from what you're telling me that relatively quickly you come up with a very basic layout of what the track plan will be.
Yeah, in many cases, sometimes it's something that takes a while and has to be messed around with quite a bit. I won't say they just come spinning out, but especially the smaller ones. Again, it's fairly easy to figure out how much will fit and how much won't.
And okay, so you say here on your you use a 2D CAD program called MacDraft. So you do it on Apple, right? And do you know what CAD stands for?
I know what it's supposed to stand for.
Yeah, it stands for Computer Aided Design. And I'm very happy with that, because for years I had no idea. Guys would talk, Bruce would go about CAD and this thing for CAD, and another guy would talk CAD. And I'm like, I don't know acronyms at all. I don't even know my own initials, what they stand for. I hate acronyms. And then finally I was interviewing a fellow named Lex Parker, who is an interior designer. He has an interior design business, and he talked about it. And I says, what does CAD stand for? And then he told me computer-aided design. So I've been very excited for the last couple of years that I knew what it meant.
I'm happy for you.
Yeah. What are you laughing at, Tom?
No, he's happy as well. We're all happy.
Yes.
It brings great joy into our hearts.
We're happy that you are now part of that fraternity.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to get the basic design of Tom's like how? Okay, so how much do you charge to do this?
I have a very easy to understand pricing system. It's 1 beer per plan.
Holy moly!
So,
1 beer per. That's what you charge as a beer?
That's what I charge because if I got paid for this, then I'd have to do it, and it wouldn't be fun anymore.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
I just said to one of my first customers, said, what can I pay you for this? I said, just buy me a beer at the next event we go to. And the funny thing is, I don't really drink beer very much, so some people get really tied up in knots about what kind of beer I like, and this kind of
want
thing.
A tall can or a
joke.
short can, draft?
So your list of people that want plans must be growing exponentially, is it?
It's rather long, and this is an avocation, so it's hard for me to finish more than 1 or 2 plans a month, and my list is indeed growing. I've probably got a good year backlog right now.
Yeah, one other thing as we go forward, Bob, we really don't use words that are bigger than 2 syllables for me. Okay, so how long did it take you to it's a reverse mushroom, like you say, it's kind of the inside back, it's kind of like an inside out mushroom. So how long did it take you to come up with the very first part? So as Tom is building the building, or I guess, did you already have the building built, Tom, when you first approached him?
Yes.
So how long was the waiting time at that point?
A couple weeks, maybe.
Yeah, I did not have nearly the list that I have now, so I was probably able to get to Tom pretty quick, and sometimes the first ones go pretty quick depending on what I'm up to, and I get a lot of this done on airplane flights and things like that when I can't do anything else. So.
Okay, so all right, so pretty quickly then you had the basic benchwork design done, probably. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean it was, if I remember right, it was a couple weeks. Then the first thing you sent was, there were, I think, 2 or 3 ideas in terms of footprint. In terms of the kind of the basic footprint, and then we kind of went back and forth on those for a while. And then we eventually kind of had the discussion about, the higher ceilings and looking to get more of a longer run. And then, as I recall, you kind of took that discussion back, and then I think it was a few weeks after that you came back with the mushroom idea and basically the footprint of what we currently have. So there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of dialogue via email to kind of get to that what I considered that light bulb moment where we had the design, that I felt was a home run with the helix and this mushroom design, and then from there that was kind of our go moment, and it was just refinement from there, which was what we're still working on.
So do you eventually then you're going to end up with one of these finished plans like you have on your website?
That's the goal.
That's right.
All right. Then I can put it on. Then I'll be able to put it on the ML website. Will I be able to do it then, Tom?
Sure.
All right. Thanks.
And maybe by then I'll even have a Facebook page.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
A question on something that size, it may or may not be an issue, but anytime you got mushrooms at multiple levels, do you take into consideration access for getting out in case there's an emergency, or it's not an issue because you're not that far? Or how do you handle something like that?
I think it's important consideration. I mean, one thing about Tom's is although there's some choke points, we've got some pretty wide aisles, and so I've certainly been at places that were pretty claustrophobic, and you'd really worry about that if you had too many people in there. But worst case, Tom has probably got a 50-foot trip if you had to go all the way around the outside of the building and get out the door. So let's hope it never has to be tested in that particular respect.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Bruce.
Oh, no, I just brought it because I know the Edmonton Model Railroad Association, they have a fair size mushroom layout. And that's one of the thing they had to put in a couple like emergency exits from the inner part of the upper part to the mushroom in case there was something like that, so people could get out without having to run 40 feet one way and then 40 feet back the other way.
Yeah, if you were over by the corner where Beltline Junction comes into Reading Yard, which is essentially the end of the aisle, and you had to your point, Bruce, if you had to go all the way up the south side of the building and around and back out the north side of the building, raised floor to get out to the door, you're talking, maybe 60 feet total.
Yeah, and it's a modern building, so chances of something all of a sudden just flaring up at such a rapid rate that you couldn't get out would be highly improbable.
Yeah, and we were very, very diligent with the wiring, in terms of making sure that everything was up to code. Eventually when I have operating sessions, I will have a couple fire extinguishers. I do have a smoke detector out there now that's tied into my home security system. So, I have been considering, some of that stuff. One thing I actually did that is I did it originally as a means to facilitate the design, but it actually has the secondary benefit of a safety perspective is that I had the door replaced. Originally, when we built the barn, it was an in-swing door in that it opened into the layout room. And that was actually causing some challenges with construction. So earlier this summer, I had the door changed to an outswinging door, which has helped with the plan, but also, that would help that if there was something where everybody had to get out of there in a hurry, it would make egress much easier because the door's opening out.
Right, exactly, rather than the door opening in.
Right.
Yeah. You have any other fun things you want to ask about, Bruce?
No, it's just I thought of that because the trend to larger layout these days, that that's something that you should think about.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's a fair question, especially on a layout that size, especially in an older building or something like that. Something fair. Anyways, shall we move on? You're right. It's a serious topic. I'd be interesting to know if anybody's layout, like to me, I always say the most dangerous thing about model railroading is you might leave the soldering iron in the wrong place and start the layout on fire. But I just don't ever see, if you think of my house, Bruce, and my layout, if you were in the back corner, way over in the back corner of the layout, it was a long walk to get anywhere near getting outside.
Yeah.
It was like you had to go down, and you'd have to go down one peninsula and back up another peninsula and then out the door, then down the hall. And I mean, really, at one end of the layout, you were about as far away from the door as you could get. And I think my house
That's for sure. Yeah.
I think my house is it's roughly 2,100 square foot bungalow. So I think it's like roughly 30 feet wide by 50 or 60 feet long. So you're probably 60, 70 feet from the door at that point. So thanks for never bringing that up while you were here.
Yeah, well, no problem. That's why I always like to be dispatcher. I was close to the door.
Exactly. So okay, so you guys have now decided it's going to be a mushroom, and I mean that must have been fairly extensive alone, wasn't it, Tom and Bob, to design that benchwork? I mean that would be. Here's a fair question. I think this is a fair question. Are some layouts more appealing to you to design than others?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of again, the part of the benefit of doing it for fun is that I can play to my own tendencies. But I think there are certain things that people look for in a modern design that, you know, some of the things that we sort of take for granted, but not always, like the idea of the sincere track plan where track only goes through one scene once, and you sense that you're moving from west to east or east to west or north to south consistently, and representations that are, if they're not actually taken from the prototype, they could have been. So that's kind of fun. I've had a few folks ask me for things that were totally freelance, and I can do it, but it's to me not as challenging as creating something that really does pick up on what the prototype's all about, which is operation and moving stuff from one place to another. So, you know, I tend to gravitate toward, you know, things with relatively narrow shelves and peninsulas and walk-in designs and things that are generally accepted as being effective in layout design. And if somebody really pushes me into, you know, doing something that I don't think is going to be really satisfying for them in the long term, you know, that's not as much fun.
Right. So okay. So you're more interested in designing a prototype railroad than you are a freelance railroad, just because there's something based in reality that you can work off of.
Yeah, and there's a fun challenge to saying, you know, I gotta figure out enough about how this prototype operated and what all these tracks are for that I can see on Google Maps, and then artfully condense them down into something that's practical to build.
Yeah.
And that's part of the fun as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. How many track plans do you think are on your website?
I think it's 60 to 70 now.
Wow. Have you looked at this website, Bruce?
I've bing perusing it as we've been chatting.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I mean, I'm just like, I'm blown away by this. This is like discover. This is like the first time I ran a Cato, a Cato powered Atlas locomotive, or an Atlas powered Cato locomotive, or whatever. It was a Cato powered Atlas locomotive and RS3. This is like the first time I did that. It's like I've stumbled onto this website. It's just like, it's spectacular. Everybody that has never heard or been to this website, I guarantee you, 99.9% of the people that open this up they're going to be sitting there with their mouth open going, oh my God, look at this. I mean, Tom, what kind of a website did you have when you first, Tom, how much of an idea did you have of Bob's layout designing prowess?
I didn't. I mean, like I said, I got the reference or the referral from Rob, but that was basically, you should talk to this guy. Here's his website, and then so I went on the website, basically, you know, kind of sight unseen, and saw, the different designs and everything, and then read about his process and was like, oh, okay, this guy kind of, knows what he's doing. So, yeah, but no, I had, before that referral from Rob, I was, I was kind of, I was kind of lost. I just didn't really know how I was going to tackle. I had the, like I said, I had the idea of what I wanted to model in terms of the towns and the kind of the theme of the layout, and some key signature locations, but I really didn't have any sense of how to fit all that into the room. I was just kind of, I would go out to the barn and just stare at the four walls and like, all right, now what?
Right.
It's drywalled and painted. Now what do I do? So I can't say enough about the process that Bob and I have worked on over the past 3+ years, in terms of the dialogue and going back and forth with different ideas. And Bob's been very not a stern taskmaster, but Bob's been very diligent about being objective and kind of keeping me grounded in that. I'll have a tendency to want to cram too much in, and there's been a couple emails where he's said, well, you can't really do this because it's gonna, you're either gonna not have enough distance between towns, or if you, and actually I remember when you were here that day, Bob, and we were working on the helix, I remember we were talking about the entrance into the helix from Mertztown and kind of how we were laying it out, and kind of the way that I had wanted to position everything without thinking it through was going to create a pretty nasty S-curve, which down the road would have led to operational headaches and probably derailments and things like that. So, in terms of the process itself, it's really been good to have Bob as not a disinterested third party, but a neutral, objective observer who isn't as married to the source material,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
He can be much more objective about it than maybe I can. And that
He has the ability to stand back and say, no, because you're more deeply involved, and yet he can stand back a step or two and kind of go, well, that's great, Tom, but I don't think that's going to work.
Exactly. And Bob, I'd be interested in your take on all of this too, from your viewpoint, as the designer.
Well, I think it's been a lot of fun because, Tom, your knowledge of the prototype is encyclopedic. Sorry, Lionel, and so it's fun to you'll come in and say, okay, we're now looking at this 1 mile stretch of track near Albertus, and I want this turnout and that turnout, and this was removed, and by the time of my era, so thanks for drawing it in, but you can take it out again. And it sort of extends the fun because we started with a shell, and now we're working in a lot of the details, and you're able to really tell me what's important to you and what isn't. And I think John Armstrong again coined the phrase. It was something like benign pessimism or something like that about what will fit in a particular space. And I think that's part about what you're talking about, that I can say, yeah, you can cram that in there, but you're going to be sorry if you do.
Yeah.
And, I don't have to build the darn thing. So I can stand back and say that because I've designed enough and tried to cram things in anyway. And sometimes you just have to say, you know what, that's just not going to fit in this room.
So I looked up encyclopedic in my Merriam-Webster, and it says knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I probably could have just said that.
Okay, I'm going to deviate for a minute, then we're going to get back to it. It's like there's like a million track plans here, and we got to talk about some of those before we stop. But I'm going to deviate. Tom, we've never met face to face, but I would say we've talked enough that you have a sense of who I am. Would that be fair?
Maybe, yeah, I kind of think so.
Yeah, I know where I kind of just spit stuff out, and sometimes it comes out the right way, and sometimes it comes out the wrong way. But I have a tendency to want to tell you anyways, whether I'm right or wrong. Well, that would be a fair statement, wouldn't you say, Bruce?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Tom. So here's what I'm imagining: we go to a Philadelphia Flyers game. I got my shirt. I got my Orsk Kindrachuk shirt. I got the jersey. I got the whole thing. Like I've come. You're taking me to a game, and I went for the jersey. I am rooting for the Flyers every step of the way. They're playing the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I am a Flyers fan for the night.
Okay.
And they score. It's 2-0 Flyers. Columbus Blue Jackets scores goal, makes it 2-1. At the end of the second, we have our beer during the second intermission, and the third period starts, and 3 minutes in, the Flyers score to make it 3-1. And I jump up, and I'm just rooting like I got my hands in the air in the whole 9 yards, and I look over, and you're going, hey, that's pretty good. Way to go.
Well, that's gonna, I think it's gonna depend on whether or not we're in the cheap seats, or whether we're in my corporate suite with clients sitting there.
Yeah, see, that's perfect. That would be perfect. I think, Bruce, I think I nailed it because I don't care where I'm sitting. You're
going to go and have a good fun and cheer as hard as you can.
There's scoring and there's beer going everywhere. I don't care who's sitting where they're sitting.
Exactly.
But besides that, when I was listening to you talk to Bob about I'm thinking, you put so much, like Bob says, you're like an encyclopedia. You put so much thought into it. And I think Bruce would testify that I didn't put a whole lot of thought into my layout. I just built it like a madman. Is that's true?
No, you actually put a lot of thought because you did make a number of changes to your layout.
Yeah, well, I have to make changes because I build it one way first, and then I got to go back and make changes. It's like the podcast. It's like everything I do. Well, I can always fix it. But the only thing I ever did in my life where I actually kind of went, well, there's no screwing around here, is when I built this house. And I thought, well, this is actually a house. And if it kind of starts creaking and shifting and everything, and I actually put a lot of work into making it just right. But everything else, I'm kind of like, well, I could go back and fix that. Don't worry about it. So, Bob, I want full and complete recognition for when you realize that the third level on Tom's layout is solid and won't come down. That is all on me. It's built solid, and there's like good solid braces underneath that section. I'm taking full credit for that.
That sounds good. I'll remember that when I'm there.
Yeah, one night we were looking at it, and I'm kind of going, well, you kind of might want to put some braces under that section there. So you got like 60 or 70 plans on your layout. And it's like how do you? So this software you use, this is the same kind. This is like you can draw in the trees and all that stuff. I mean, it's so beautiful. These layouts are so beautiful. These plans are just gorgeous, just gorgeous. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, Bruce, you're more of a planning guy. You know all the right things to say about this. To me, I'm just like scrolling through this, going,
they are state of the art as far as the industry's going for layout plans that you see published.
Yeah, state of the art. That would be true. And I mean, it's just like this treasure trove of stuff where, there's just so many great ideas. on each plan. Now, how is this? Did I hear somebody say you redesigned your website? Is this, or has this been the way the website's been for a while?
No, I redid it about a year ago, I think.
And did you do it yourself? Did you do the website yourself, or?
I did.
And do you use a particular software, or?
It's the Wix platform, WIX,
Oh, okay.
which is which is pretty good if you use it. It's got a lot of stuff built in that I'd have no idea how to do, and they have all these templates, and you can sort of adapt them to what you're doing, and
again, that's part of the new world. It's just blows me away. It's like I was interviewing a guy. It must have been almost 2 years ago now, eh, Bruce? We were interviewing a guy named Luke Towan from Australia. He was a pilot for Qantas, a regional flew regionally. He just had a beautiful website, and at that point, I was plugging away with WordPress and wasn't making much headway with it, and it seemed difficult to me. And I said to him, and he had a great website, and I said, well, how'd you do your website? And he said, this company called Weebly, which is basically roughly the same idea as Wix.
Yep.
And it's just like plug and play, and man, off you go, and before you know it, you have something that looks like something. So it's like Bruce, let's scroll through some of these track plans, and it's like, oh my goodness. Like if you look at Brian Moore's CSX KD subdivision, which I think is on the second page, August 9th, 2015. Like it's like every one of these, it's just like I'm drooling over these track plans.
Yeah, that one was in Model Railroader, and I think it's the August issue.
Okay.
The Brian Moore's plan.
And you even have like it just like it has the plan, and then it has the the map of where it was and everything. It's just, my goodness gracious sakes alive. I don't hardly. Tom, do you have a question? I'm stuck here for a minute because I got 1,000 questions and I don't know which one to ask next.
No, I'm good.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to just keep going. All right. So how long does it take you to do a track plan? Like how many hours a week do you work on this? Because there are so many things on your website, so many track plans. Like you said, would you say 60, 70 track plans on here?
Yeah.
Like how long do you spend?
Well, it's. I mean, I'm lucky if I get 4 or 5 hours a week on track planning. But it's like anything else that if you work on it, an hour here, an hour there, and after 2 or 3 weeks, it's pretty well come together. And so something like Brian's plan was. It's a little on the complicated side because it's a double level, dual deck railroad, so that might have taken a little longer. But it comes together fast enough to make it still be fun, and I've done enough of these that I, got some tricks that I can do to, I've got certainly a lot of elements. Be they, I have a lot of switches drawn out, the popular turnouts drawn out so that I don't have to create those every time, and loops and structures that are, a lot of the Walther's kits I've drawn out for one person or another so I can throw them into the plan and make sure they fit without having to draw them all over again. So it's time consuming, but
but that's the beauty of CAD. All that simple stuff, boom, boom, click, snap,
yep.
Rotate, whatever, line up, and there you go. Rather than worrying about old templates and paper and oops, better erase that, and I only got 12 shots before I'm through the paper and I have to start again and things like that.
And Mac Draft is that a fairly intense program, or is that something people could afford to buy, or is it a?
Yeah, I want to say it's about $250 or something like that for the Pro edition. It's as CAD programs go, it's pretty simple and yet it has a fair amount of features. Now, it's not a model railroad designing program. It's just a program, and so it doesn't have anything built in to help you calculate grades or anything like that. It's just a vanilla CAD 2D program, but I've been using it for years, so I'm so used to it that that I hate to make myself learn anything else.
Right. Okay. And I feel like this is like one of the worst, Bruce, I feel like this is one of the worst interviews I've ever done because I feel like there must be 1,000 frigging questions I should be asking this guy because the problem is while I'm talking, I keep looking at different layouts and I'm like, I don't, now I'm looking at Richard Van Laar's Clinchfield layout and it's like, it's absolutely magnificent. And it's like, it's just a treasure trove of information on this website. Like, do you have any statistics of how many people visit the website, or do you have it? Are there links, or anything like that? Like, do you have any statistics about how many people visited the website?
No, I don't. I know that everyone who's visited the website recently has asked me to design a plan for them, so that's why I keep getting stuck. My list keeps getting longer, but no, I don't. I don't track anything, and it's not a e-commerce site. I just put it up for fun.
You sound like a very laid-back guy. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty laid back.
All right. So your passions, you still like music, but is your number one passion aside from work? Is it the track planning? Is it model railroading and the track planning?
Yeah, I think so. I've been playing a lot of tennis recently and having fun with that. But if I was on a desert island, I'd want to have a good hobby shop there so I could keep model railroading.
And how big is your layout going to be?
I want to say it's about 24 by 12 or so.
Okay. And do you know somebody to plan it, or do you send? This is like a barber. Do you get somebody else to plan it, or do you plan it yourself?
Well, that it's definitely the shoemaker's children, and I've got a plan, but it's not finished, and I started building anyway. But again, one of the things it's sort of an experiment. But one of the things about the Ma and Pa was that it was so small. I mean, the whole main line was 70 miles long, and I'm literally doing some of the towns and some of the scenes full scale because they fit. The locomotives were small, the cars were small, the towns were small, and the other thing is there's a pretty active historical society that, among other things, has a complete drawing of the entire line in scale, so I could scan it and resize it to HO scale and trace it basically, and have a lot of my LDEs all set to go. And it's still been a challenge, but like the whole yard in Baltimore, I probably got it, every track that was in it, and 2/3 or so the size of the real thing if you laid it out completely, and that's going to be really satisfying because I think we'll be able to operate very much like the prototype did.
And what year are you modeling?
1924.
Okay. And do you remember earlier our conversation about CAD and and acronyms?
Yeah.
What does LDE mean?
Oh, I thought that it was in the lexicon. That's Tony Custer's word for layout design element.
Okay.
And his basic idea is you take a chunk of the prototype, usually fairly small, and reproduce it as best you can in miniature. And even if you've shrunk it down a little bit, it still has a good dose of realism because the basic layout is something the prototype actually did. So what I'm doing in many cases, especially when I have a prototype to follow, is I'm looking at Google Maps and other sources and looking at the real track layout and saying, oh, I can grab that little bit there and that little bit there and string them together along a main line and have something that has a lot of realism to it.
Okay.
Like the clinch field you were just looking at, has the yard at Dante, I think that's how you say it, which is a classic clinch field thing, and it has, and you can still see this on Google Maps. I don't know if you're still looking at that plan, but you have the turntable sort of in the middle in between the main line and the yard lead, and it's all squeezed into this little mountain valley that curves around. And so I was sort of able to to mimic that there on the upper left-hand corner of the lower level. And it's not exact by any means, because the Clinchfield's yard was much, much bigger than you could fit in this basement, but it still, I think, captures a lot of the flavor of the prototype.
I have another question about layout design elements, but first I wanted to tell you that my son, I drive a Hyundai Santa Fe now because my son sells Hyundais, but I did used to have a Lexicon ES300. Wait a minute,
Nice car.
That was a Lexus.
They retain a lot of their value.
Yeah. Well, all right. What Lexicon? What were you trying to say there?
I thought there's been a lot written about LDEs.
I'm sure there has. Do I sound like a learned man to you? Do I sound like a guy that reads a lot?
You have your finger on the pulse of the hobby.
Yeah. That's nice that you think that I read a lot, though, Bob. I have written a lot, but I don't really read much. Aisle width. What's your minimum aisle width? Oh no! Before we go on, I have an LED question. LDE question. LDE. Yeah. And I also have an LED
design element.
I also have an LED question. One of the marker lights on my trailer's gone. No.
Princess Auto.
Yeah. Right now, Tom is sitting with his clients going, I don't know who this guy is. I have no idea.
We'll let this guy in.
Yeah. Tom's going to test run this podcast before he lets anybody listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. Layout design elements. So I'm assuming with Tom's layout, with the size of it and being a mushroom in a long, long mainline run, you must be able to incorporate a lot of layout design elements, or as they say in the industry, LDEs.
Well, funny you should bring that up. Actually, there's a bunch of them, and I think one of the driving things for Tom was mimicking some of the junctions in and around Reading. We sort of started there. There's the Beltline Junction, which is Tom, you can tell better than I, but the main line from Philadelphia sort of comes up from the south and gets diverted around the main part of Reading on a track called the Beltline, and then there's the main part of Reading Yard, and the line from the west from Hershey and all comes in, interchanges with the Beltline, and then goes into Reading Yard, which is to the east a little bit, and then comes back up to the north to rejoin the Beltline. So there's Beltline Junction there, and it's got a very satisfying set of turnouts that bring initially the Beltline together with the main line out of the Reading Yard, and then also diverges to a line that heads up north, and then diverges to the main line that heads east toward Allentown. And so that's in there turnout for turnout. And it takes a lot of space, even with number sixes, but it's there, and Tom will be able to mimic a lot of the traffic through there because it's all live. In other words, we have the tracks coming from Reading Yard, and we have the tracks coming from the Beltline, and then we have the tracks heading to the north. I forget what that is, Tom, but
that's the original. That's the main line up to Newberry Junction.
Newberry, right?
Yep.
And that heads into a staging yard, and then the line to the east, Allentown, is live and continues around the peninsula. So you can have trains coming in from any of those four directions and route them through this maze of turnouts, and it's reproduced again track for track from the way the prototype was in the era that Tom was modeling.
Yep.
So okay, so then going back to our earlier discussion, then when you kind of have to pull back on the reins of Tom's enthusiasm, it's probably because he's trying to cram too much of a layout design element into a particular section. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, probably too many layout design elements, because they do tend to take up a lot of space.
Okay.
And, you want to have some running room between them for lots of reasons. So we had designs that had more LDEs in them than the plan does now, and we had to scratch our heads at one point and say we're just being a little too ambitious to put. It'd be nice to have this other junction or this other classic scene, but it's we got to make some choices here.
So, Tom, has there been something that you've kind of had to suck it up and take out of the plan that you were like, geez, I didn't want to take that out? Like, is there something where you had to be a big boy and put on your big boy pants and kind of go, well, I guess we can't have that after all then?
Yeah, in the most recent round of back and forth, when you come out of Beltline Junction, there's actually when you're heading east toward Allentown, the first stretch of track is actually single track, and that's known as the Blandon low grade. And then it goes back to double track in the town of Blandon. So today on the prototype and back in the Reading days, this was very, this was kind of a choke point, because you had, the double track mains going down to a stretch of single track, and you'd have trains, that would have to wait at either end and all of that. So operationally, that would have been another set of interlockings, and it would have added some delay into a crew's run.
Right.
And, sometimes delay is actually a good thing when it comes to
yes, I agree.
quality of run.
Yes.
Having a longer run and a more interesting run.
Absolutely.
So we were looking at that, but we figured out, ultimately, I think we kind of arrived at, or at least I arrived at, the conclusion that while we could fit it in, that stretch of single track would have basically been long enough for a train. So, normally you want to have like a train and a half length between towns to have running room and everything, as Bob said a few minutes ago. So while we could have technically fit it in, it wouldn't have given the right look and feel from an operational perspective. So we ultimately decided to just go with the double track main and handle the interest through other ways. So that was one example. But I mean, honestly, that's really the only one that comes to mind. We've been able to accommodate almost everything else that I've wanted to include. The key features, either visually or operationally, we were able to fit everything in. Now, some things took some modeler's license. Getting the line, the original main line headed south toward Philadelphia, we're cheating a little bit to have that run under the line west and go into staging. But other than that, everything is very accurate to the prototype. And what is a great example of a layout design element, Lionel?
What's that?
We have on the layout now?
What's that?
Albertus.
Of course.
That's jazz capital of the world, isn't it?
What is it?
Albertus?
Albertus, yeah.
The jazz capital of the world, did you say?
You didn't know that, yeah.
I did not know that. Did you know that, Tom?
I did not.
Do you know who Oris Kindrachuk is?
I feel like I've heard that name.
Oh, my goodness gracious. For crying out loud. Bruce, you know who Oris Kindrachuk is, don't you?
A famous NHL player. Well, famous to some.
Famous to some, especially if you lived in the Philadelphia area.
Exactly.
A walk-on. The guy was a walk-on. He was a walk-on to the Philadelphia Flyer training camp. Okay, Bob. Some quick questions, and then we're going to wrap this up. And aisle width. What is the minimum aisle width, and what is your ideal aisle width?
Well, ideal for me is 4 feet, and in practice, it's you're giving up a lot of layout space to try to have 4 feet aisles everywhere. So generally, I try to have some stretches that are 4 feet wide, especially around yards and other places where you're apt to have several operators. And then to me, it's okay to shrink down to as little as 2 feet if it's a choke point, like around a turn back curve or something like that, and it's just people will be able to, without too much difficulty, go through single file. I hate going any narrower than that for anything that's going to be operated.
Okay. So, and do you do operations anywhere? Are you an operations guy at all, or?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun, and there's a pretty active group down in this in the DC area. Matt Thompson, sort of unofficial chairperson of that, and a number of folks, including Steve King, who's kind of a guru of TT and TO operation, and so I've learned from the master a little bit, and have a lot of fun doing that. And there's nothing like going to operating sessions to teach you what you want to design into your own railroad. Because trying to work in a 3-foot aisle with 4 guys all trying to switch on different levels of a double decker or something, you're going to say, I'm not going to go with the 3-foot aisle for that situation, because you've gotten just a little too intimate with some of your fellow operators.
And I guess that also helps with your track planning overall skills, is that operating sessions, you now have a better idea what will and won't work in a given space. I've
been known to grab a tape measure from the owner and measure something like an aisle or a deck separation. So that's what that really looks like.
Now, what did you say that guy's name was? That Matt Newman?
Matt Thompson.
Matt Thompson. I knew that, and it was Sammy Del Bracco show. I got it now. Matt Thompson.
Okay,
very good. I'm gonna have to track down Matt Thompson. If that just sounds like a name you can do business with, and if you're talking about him, it's got to be worth he's got to be worth talking to. Ideal height, ideal layout height.
I think that's something of a personal preference. If I was picking an ideal single deck height, I'd say it's in the 48 inches range. And when I'm doing a double deck, I think lower deck of 40 inches and upper deck of 60 inches is pretty ideal. Now, in most cases, unless you have a completely flat railroad, that's going to change, because I'm speaking floor to railhead, not bench work. But it's great to if you have a scene where you're going to be doing a lot of switching, you don't want to make it a whole lot higher than 60 inches off the floor, or a whole lot lower than 40 inches off the floor, or it's going to be uncomfortable. And you want to have enough separation between decks so that you're not banging your head on the upper deck every time you lean over to look at a car number.
Actually, I remember as you're talking about double deck, and I actually had a double deck section on my layout just because I thought it would be cool and I wanted to see what it was like. That's how I did my track planning. So track planning, you've been doing it. So do you mind if I ask you how old of a man you are?
I'm 60.
All right. You might want to see a doctor. No, I'm just kidding. You look fine. You look wonderful for 60. So who did you, when you started track planning, so probably 40 years ago, you started track planning, and do you have people that you look up to for track planning? Do you have people that you aspire to do as well as? Are there people in the hobby that you think to yourself, boy, that guy really knows what he's doing?
Well, it's interesting. I did a keynote for the local division earlier this year, and I went back and sort of picked up images of some of the best track plans historically. And I started with Frank Ellison's Delta Lines, which Chris changed while he was building it. And then I had the Goria Defeated, and then I had John Armstrong's home layout, which I was fortunate enough to see before he passed away. And then some other sort of landmark layouts along the way, like there was the Ohio Southern that was the first really well-known double-deck layout, I think, and then what's his name? Missing it for the Maumee route. Bill Darnaby,
Right.
which would really it was one of the first long, narrow shelf, really long run multi-deck plan, and then brought it all the way up to Tony Custer's current railroad, which I think is very well designed, and I wound up actually with a couple local boys, Paul Dolkus, who is well known, and Lance Mendheim, and so I sort of looked at the what changed, and you have Frank Ellison's railroad, which was mind blowing for its time, but we look at it now and say, oh my God, trains are looping around and passing each other, going on the same bridge, and one train's going north and the other train's going south on the same bridge, and people popping up out of holes in the middle of things and like that. But at its time, it was fantastic. And then you see other trends develop over the years, and winding up with I've seen Paul's railroad in person, and also Lance's many times in the pictures, and what those guys have done, which I think is really important, is they just leave enough room for scenery. When you look at Paul's railroad, you say there's not much track for the amount of space, and it's because he either has worked from photos or gone out and measured and say, well, a road is really this wide, and the shoulders are really that wide on either side, and you can't have two cars passing on a road that's only 8 feet wide. So everything just feels very spacious, and then when you see it in photograph, it's beautiful because it's proportioned right, very artistically, but still, with believable prototype dimensions. So I've sort of seen that as a trend recently. But I go back to John Armstrong as the master who really figured out what track planning is, and he had some. I said in my talk that he reminds me a little of Frank Lloyd Wright in the sense that his buildings were fabulous, but nobody wanted to live in them. And John Armstrong's plans were amazing, but he didn't want to try to pass anyone in one of John Armstrong's aisles. But in terms of the fundamentals, they're still as valuable as the day he wrote it.
Exactly. Like everything develops, everything improves. I mean, cameras are a lot different than they were when Yusuf Karsh was a photographer. I mean, everything improves, everything changes. And so what was it like to see John Armstrong? When that must have been many, many years ago you saw John Armstrong's in person.
Yeah, I was a teenager, so it was probably late 60s, early 70s, and it was pretty amazing in person. John had a love-hate relationship with scenery, so it wasn't the most beautiful railroad, but when you realize what he'd done in that basement in O-scale, and many of the features that we take for granted now were brand new, sort of spiral aisle and all walk-in, and he had a walk-around control system years before DCC that all used surplus stepping relays from the phone company, and so you could walk around, follow your train, and there'd be a little station with push buttons where you could control your train independently of the others, and it was fabulous. But I don't know. I don't know how he built it.
So how do you remember how you got there? Were you like with your dad, or was you part of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
My dad took, just called him up one day and said, I knew he lived in the area and he was in Silver Spring, Maryland. And said, Mr. Armstrong, love to come see your layout. And he said, sure, come on over.
So that was your dad, who was in the White House press corps and went to China with Dan Rather and Barbara Walters and all those people, and President Nixon.
The same one.
And traveled all over the world with Henry Kissinger. That guy.
Yep.
Holy moly. I just love doing this podcast. I think this podcast is just the coolest thing I've ever done.
So we learned so much neat stuff about people.
I know. Like it's like it used to be. That's all you ever talked about was model railroading, which is fun to talk. I mean, we've learned tons and tons and tons of stuff tonight. But I mean, you start asking people about their lives, and it's like just amazing listening to people talk. It's like this past week. I was in Boston. I took my son and I went to see a couple of games at Fenway Park in Boston, and we passed the Berkeley School of Music. Do you remember what that is, Bruce?
That's where Mr. Barraza went, was
exactly. So I'm driving down. Actually, we walked home from one game, or walked back to the to the hotel on the first night, and right there we went right past the Berkeley School of Music, and I'm thinking, I know Dave Barraza went there, and and I'd started telling my son, and my son thought it was just the coolest thing that, you learn out how this guy ends up being a signal maintainer or a signal designer or signal system designer for transits, systems and everything. And he thought it was cool. And it's just the neatest thing. Do we have any more questions, boys? I think we're going to stop here because we've used up our allotted time.
Just one quick question. Of the number of people who have contacted you to do track plans, how many of those are actually being built?
I don't think any of them are actually being built. No, I take it back. There's this one guy in Pennsylvania who's definitely building it.
That's a guy with a 30 by 40 foot barn?
Just so happens, yeah.
I thought it was 50 by 70.
I know of several that are under construction, and one of them, this guy, he's up in New Brunswick or something, and he wrote me and he actually took a plan out of Model Railroader, and he said that this is, I've been looking for the plan, and this is a perfect plan for me, and thank you so much. And I said, great, and I don't have to do any work on it, knock yourself out. But the original plan had been for a mountain short line railroad, and he had converted it into like a flatland seaside thing. And I said, but there are like all these helixes and grades and stuff like that. But hey, if he's happy, I'm happy. So I know he's working on. He sends me videos once in a while, and which is pretty cool.
That's really neat. That is really neat. Okay, so Bruce, we got to give out our email address.
Our email address, for those who wish to send us an email, our email address is modelerslife, modelers with one L, modelerslife@gmail.com.
And we have a Facebook page. It's Modelers Life podcast, or it's at facebook.com/Modelers Life. And we have our website, amodelerslife.com. And we have our Patreon site. So about 6 months ago, Bob, I have so many interesting people to talk to and so much stuff, and I didn't have enough bandwidth on the place. I was doing it for free, so then I started this Patreon site where you can sign up for $5 a month and get a whole bunch more podcasts, which is like 16 cents a day, so I don't mind doing that. And that's patreon.com/Modelers Life. And I think that pretty much covers everything, doesn't it?
Well, just to point out, on modelerslife.com, there's links to the iTunes and Libsyn libraries of all our past podcasts.
Exactly right. Exactly.
And special things like the elevator music CD.
Exactly. And I'm looking forward to. There's so many things to do. I'm looking forward to that industrial fan noise too. That's going to be a good one.
The excitement is building on that one.
Yeah, exactly. Bob, do you find the same thing? Like, yeah, I guess we already talked about that. But it's like, I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that the social media and the digital age is making this hobby grow at a phenomenal rate. Just a phenomenal rate, because like you say, recently, with more and more people are contacting you and they find you.
Yeah. I think that's the amazing thing, is you can find just about anything you want, and you can usually find a YouTube video of somebody really good demonstrating it too.
Yeah, there's somebody really good demonstrating it too. Exactly. And I highly recommend, I'm going to say it one more time, I'm telling everybody, go to bobstrackplans.com. This website will absolutely blow your mind. It is fabulous. Absolutely fabulous what you've done here.
You were very nice. Very nice. Thank you very much.
You hear that, Tom?
I totally agree.
All right. So when we're at the game, at the Philadelphia Flyers game, and the Flyers score and beer goes flying everywhere, don't be getting mad at me.
I wouldn't dream of it.
All right. Do you have a jersey?
You know what? I don't.
Jeez.
That is the one piece of attire I have yet to purchase. And I have a Phillies jersey, I have an Eagles jersey, but I have yet to get a Flyers jersey. And part of that has been solely because I've been debating on, do I want to get an actual player jersey with the name and number on it, or do I just want to get a plain one? You know, it's a big decision.
No, just get the plain one.
They're not cheap.
Just get the plain one for now, and then you can put on whoever you want later.
Yeah, that's true.
And just don't put on anybody that's younger than you. Like, don't be like a 50-year-old guy with a player who's like 22 years old. That's
like Austin Matthews. Or something.
Yeah, like that's just
Right.
that's just creepy.
Yeah.
Like all my
You can go with
So
someone
I've
like
got it. So
Bobby Clark.
yeah
I was just going to say Bobby Clark,
Yeah.
Bernie Perrant, Dave
yeah,
Smith,
absolutely.
those
You
guys.
can
There you
pick
go.
any of those guys, and you're good to go. All right. So Bob, at the end of the show, we have us. We're going to be Bob. Could we interview you again in a year or two?
If you can stand it, sure.
Absolutely.
This has
Are
really
you
been
kidding?
fun.
I'm gonna have
Maybe we'll be done with my plan by then.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do
Hopefully.
updates. We're gonna have to have an update on the big the building. By then, you'll have added an extension. It'll be an L-shaped building.
Yeah. And then I guess the great debate is going to be on Tom's Facebook page first, or will be on bobstrackplans.com first.
Yeah, exactly. So at the appropriate moment, Bob, you have to say "Happy Rails" to you. And
I think I can handle it.
okay, and you'll know when that is. Are we done, boys? Have we covered everything? We've been
I
talking.
think so.
We haven't covered everything, but we've been
Well, we've
talking.
covered a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we've talked to this fine gentleman for an hour, and this is like almost 2 hours. So I think we've tortured him enough. So I think we'll call it a day now. What do you
It was
think?
lots of fun.
It was. And you are, sir, you are a huge benefit to the hobby. You are doing the hobby a great service by doing all of this and having that great website. I'm telling you, you're doing the hobby a great service. And
You serve too, R, because I know this is a great investment of time on your part, and those of us out in Radio Land that listen to this podcast and other podcasts. It's not lost on me, certainly, that the amount of time you devote to making this happen and getting guests and thinking about questions and tracking down people who don't call you on Skype and things like that. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? That's a great idea. I should think about questions.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this podcast is just an endless source of information. I never thought of that before.
Questions? Oh, I'm just talking to the
Yeah,
guy.
I could be prepared. Hey, that would be kind of a switch. Well, Bob, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
Happy Rails to you.
It's another Lincoln Homer.